"You are not worthless, child." The elderly woman's words hung in the air between us as tears streamed down my bruised face. "How can you possibly know that?" I whispered, my voice breaking. "My husband took everything, my children, my home, my dignity. He's right about me." She took my trembling hands in her weathered ones, her eyes fierce with a conviction I couldn't understand. "Because I sat where you're sitting 43 years ago," she said. "My husband beat me until I couldn't stand. Then he took my 5-year-old daughter and disappeared forever." Her grip tightened. I believed I was worthless too, until someone showed me the truth. "Now I'm showing you." I stared at this stranger who somehow saw through my carefully constructed lies, through the makeup covering my bruises, through the practiced smile that hid my terror. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who knows exactly how it feels when a man steals your children and tells you it's your fault." Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm so glad you found us. This is a safe space for powerful stories that might just change your life. To my loyal subscribers, you are the heartbeat of this channel. Thank you for coming back week after week to support these stories of survival, redemption, and yes, sometimes sweet revenge. Before we begin today's story, I want to take a moment to say a prayer for you, my viewers. May you find strength when you feel weak, courage when you feel afraid, and clarity when life seems confusing. May you be surrounded by people who see your true worth, and may you always remember that your past does not define your future. Amen. The first slap came after I was promoted. I still remember the sound, the sharp crack of Frank's palm against my cheek, the sudden ringing in my ear, the shocked silence that followed. I remember the cold beer can crushed in his other hand, foam spilling onto our kitchen floor. "So now you think you're better than me?" he spat, rising from his recliner where he'd spent another day watching sports while I worked a double shift at Riverside Medical Center. I touched my stinging cheek, too stunned to speak. This was Frank, my husband of 8 years, father of our children, the man who had once written me love poems and promised to cherish me forever. "Mom?" Mia's small voice came from the doorway. My 7-year-old daughter stood frozen, her wide eyes darting between us. "Everything's fine, sweetie," I said automatically, forcing a smile. "Daddy and Mommy were just having a grown-up conversation. Go finish your homework." After she reluctantly left, Frank grabbed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin. "Don't you ever make me look bad in front of the kids," he hissed. I didn't. "Getting that promotion doesn't make you special, Audrey. You're still just a nurse wiping butts for a living." I pulled away, anger briefly overcoming fear. "I'm a department manager now. And that butt wiping job pays our mortgage since you got laid off." His eyes darkened. "You think I like sitting around while my wife supports the family? You think that makes me feel good?" "Frank, I didn't mean." "Just shut up," he muttered, grabbing his keys. "I'm going out." He slammed the door behind him, leaving me standing in the kitchen, hand still pressed to my burning cheek. That should have been my warning the moment I packed up the kids and left. But loving someone means making excuses for them, doesn't it? At least that's what I told myself. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of walking on eggshells in our small brick house in Lakewood, Colorado. 3 years of covering bruises with makeup and long sleeves. 3 years of lying to coworkers about my exhaustion while juggling 12-hour nursing shifts and coming home to cook, clean, and care for Mia and Liam because Frank refused to babysit his own damn kids. It wasn't always like this. When I first met Frank at a friend's barbecue 11 years ago, he was charming, attentive, and so different from the medical students I'd dated. He worked construction then, confident in his body, proud of building things with his hands. His laugh could fill a room, and when he focused those bright blue eyes on me, I felt like the only woman in the world. "You're different," he told me on our 3rd date, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. "Most women I meet care about what I can buy them. You care about people." I blushed. "It's why I became a nurse. It's what makes you beautiful," he said, kissing me softly. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Weekend trips to the mountains, surprise picnics after my night shifts, handwritten notes left on my windshield. 6 months after we met, he proposed at the summit of Mount Evans. The entire city of Denver spread beneath us like a blanket of lights. "I want to build a life with you, Audrey," he said, down on one knee. A family, a home, everything. The warning signs were there, though I was too love-blind to see them. How he'd check my phone when I wasn't looking. How his mood would darken if male friends hugged me hello. How he'd make cutting jokes about my boring nursing stories, then say I was too sensitive when I objected. The first 2 years of marriage were good mostly. Frank's construction company was thriving in Denver's building boom. We bought our little brick house, painted every room together, planted a garden. When I got pregnant with Mia, Frank built her crib by hand, sanding the wood until it was satin smooth. "Nothing but the best for my girls," he'd say, placing a protective hand on my growing belly. Everything changed when the housing market crashed. Frank's company folded almost overnight. The man who'd taken such pride in providing suddenly couldn't find work. Each rejection seemed to chip away at something essential inside him. He started drinking in the afternoons. Started questioning every dollar I spent. Started picking fights about nothing. By the time Liam was born, Frank was a shadow of his former self. He'd find temporary jobs, then lose them for being late or arguing with supervisors. The financial burden fell entirely on me, returning to nursing just 6 weeks after giving birth. "Maybe if you hadn't rushed back to work, he wouldn't have colic," Frank said one night as I paced the floor with our screaming infant. "We need the money, Frank," I said, exhaustion making my voice sharp. "Unless you found a job?" The look he gave me then should have been my warning. Pure hatred flickered across his face before he masked it. "So it's my fault," he said quietly. "Everything's my fault." He didn't hit me that night, but something shifted between us. The verbal abuse began in earnest, constant criticism, cruel remarks, accusations of infidelity whenever I worked late shifts. He monitored my spending, questioned my parenting, mocked my career. "Nurse Audrey," he'd say sarcastically, "saving the world one bedpan at a time." I made excuses for him to everyone, my parents, my friends, myself. "He's just oppressed about work. He doesn't mean it. He's under so much pressure." The isolation happened so gradually I barely noticed. First, Frank would make scenes at gatherings until my friends stopped inviting us. Then he'd pick fights before my family visits until I'd cancel to avoid the drama. Finally, he'd refuse to watch the kids so I could go out, knowing I had no other childcare options. My world shrank to 3 points: the hospital, our house, and the children's school. My only regular social interactions were with patients and coworkers. Even then, I kept everyone at arm's length, terrified they'd see through my carefully constructed facade. The physical abuse escalated after that first slap. A push here, a grab there. Objects thrown in my direction, but not quite at me until they were. Each incident followed by tearful apologies, promises to change, sometimes even a day or 2 of the old, charming Frank before the cycle began again. The children weren't immune to the atmosphere of fear that permeated our home. Mia, once outgoing and talkative, became withdrawn at school. Her teacher called one day concerned. "Mia hasn't spoken in class for 3 days," Mrs. Reynolds said. When I asked if everything was okay at home, she started crying. "Is there something I should know?" "She's just going through a phase," I lied, my heart racing. "Her father and I will talk to her." When I mentioned the call to Frank, he exploded. "You told her teacher I'm a bad father, didn't you?" he shouted, slamming his fist on the counter. "That's why she called." "No, Frank, I would never. You're turning my kids against me." His face was inches from mine, spittle flying from his lips. "You think I don't see how they look at me?" Liam, playing in the next room, began to cry at the raised voices. Frank stormed over to him. "Stop that crying right now," he demanded. "Be a man." Liam, only 4, tried to swallow his sobs, his little chest heaving with the effort. I stepped between them. "He's just a baby, Frank. Please." Frank grabbed my arm so hard it left fingerprint bruises. Don't ever contradict me in front of my son. That night, after Frank passed out from drinking, I sat on the bathroom floor considering my options. I could leave, but where would we go? My nursing salary was decent, but not enough for a mortgage and rent elsewhere. Frank's mother would testify against me. She'd always blamed me for his emasculation. And what if he fought for custody out of spite? I opened my phone and found the number for a domestic violence hotline I'd secretly saved. My finger hovered over the call button. Then I heard Frank stirring in the bedroom and quickly deleted the number. "Mommy?" Mia's small voice came from the doorway. She stood in her unicorn pajamas, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Are you okay?" I wiped my eyes and forced a smile. "Of course, sweetie. Just a headache." She came and sat beside me on the cold tile floor, leaning her head against my arm. "I don't like it when Daddy yells." "I know, baby." I stroked her hair. "He's just having a hard time right now." She looked up at me with eyes too wise for her 7 years. "Jessica at school says her dad yelled a lot too. Then her mom took her to live somewhere else, and now her dad doesn't yell anymore when she visits him." My heart squeezed painfully. "Is that what you want? To live somewhere else?" She nodded solemnly. "Somewhere quiet, where Liam doesn't have to hide in the closet." "Liam hides in the closet?" This was news to me. "When Daddy starts getting mad. He says it's his secret fort, but I know he's scared." I pulled her close, my decision crystallizing. "I'll figure something out, Mia. I promise." The next day, I opened a separate bank account and began transferring small amounts from each paycheck, not enough for Frank to notice, but enough to slowly build an emergency fund. I researched apartments, shelters, legal aid. I created an escape plan, but I waited too long. The promotion that triggered Frank's first slap had been my lifeline: better pay, better hours, a step toward independence. Instead, it became the catalyst for more intense abuse. Each achievement at work was punished at home. Each late shift was met with accusations of affairs. Each commendation became proof that I thought I was better than him. I started making mistakes at work, forgetting medications, mixing up patient charts, losing focus during critical procedures. The strong, capable nurse I'd once been was drowning under the weight of my secret life. My supervisor noticed. My colleagues whispered. But still, I maintained the lie. "Everything's fine" became my mantra. To my coworkers, to my children's teachers, to the neighbor who heard screaming next door, to the ER doctor who treated my accidental injuries. Everything's fine. Until it wasn't. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in April. Spring had finally pushed through the stubborn Colorado winter, but I couldn't enjoy it. I'd been pulled into my supervisor's office that morning. Ms. Garrison, a normally warm woman with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, looked unusually serious as I sat across from her desk. "Audrey, your performance has been slipping," she said, her expression clouded with concern. Medication errors, incomplete charts, falling asleep during shift change. My stomach tightened. "I'm sorry. I've been distracted. This isn't like you." She leaned forward. "You've always been one of our best. Is everything okay at home?" "Of course," I said automatically. "Just not sleeping well with the kids' spring activities." She slid a box of tissues toward me, and I realized with horror that tears were streaming down my face. "Is there something you need to tell me?" she asked gently. "Resources I can connect you with?" The words caught in my throat. How could I admit that my husband had kept me up all night, screaming about dinner being cold? That he'd thrown my phone against the wall when a male colleague texted about a patient? "I'll do better," I promised instead, wiping my eyes. "It won't happen again." Ms. Garrison didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Take the rest of the day off, Audrey. Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." I should have felt relieved at the unexpected free time, but dread filled me instead. Frank would question why I was home early. He always did. As I pulled into our driveway at 11:30 a.m., my heart sank. Frank's truck was parked crookedly near the garage. He was home when he should have been at a job interview. My stomach knotted as I turned off the engine, rehearsing explanations in my head. I had barely closed the front door when his voice boomed from the kitchen. "Where the hell have you been?" He emerged, beer in hand despite the early hour. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements unsteady. "Work," I said, setting down my purse. "Ms. Garrison sent me home early to rest." "Bullshit." He stepped closer, alcohol heavy on his breath. "Your boss called. Looking for you. Said you left without telling anyone." My heart raced. That wasn't possible. I'd just spoken with Ms. Garrison. "That doesn't make sense, Frank." "I just came from her office." His fist connected with the wall beside my head, leaving a dent in the drywall. "Don't lie to me. You're screwing someone, aren't you? That's why you're never home." I glanced around frantically, suddenly realizing the house was too quiet. "Where are the kids?" "School. Where else?" He grabbed my arm, fingers digging in painfully. "Answer my question. Who is he?" "There's no one, Frank. I swear." I tried to pull away. "You're hurting me. You think this hurts?" His voice dropped dangerously. "I'll show you what hurting feels like if you don't tell me the truth." What followed was the worst fight of our marriage. I don't remember all of it. Trauma has a way of blurring the edges of our worst memories. I remember trying to reach the phone. I remember him knocking it from my hand. I remember the taste of blood as my lips split under his fist. When it was over, my uniform was torn, my face was swelling, and Frank had thrown my nursing badge into the toilet. "You're worthless," he hissed, towering over me as I crumpled against the bathroom wall. "I'm done. Taking the kids to my mother's." "No," I begged, the thought of losing Mia and Liam more painful than any physical blow. "Please, Frank. Not the children." But he was already storming through the house, calling the school to say he'd pick them up early for a family emergency. I tried to stand, to fight, but my body betrayed me. I could only watch as he grabbed their backpacks and overnight bags we kept for visits to grandparents. "They're my kids too," he said coldly. "And they're better off without a mother like you." 2 hours later, I heard his truck in the driveway. I had managed to clean myself up somewhat, though my lip was still bleeding and my eye was swelling shut. I met him at the door, desperate to see my children. Instead, Frank pushed past me alone. "Where are they?" I asked, panic rising. "With my mother." He began gathering more of their clothes. "We're staying there until you get your head straight." "Frank, please," I begged. "Let me talk to them. Let me explain." "Explain what?" He sneered. "That their mother is a lying whore? That she cares more about her job than her family." "That's not true. You know that's not true." He ignored me, stuffing Mia's favorite stuffed rabbit and Liam's action figures into a duffel bag. "The kids were asking for you," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "I told them Mommy needed some time alone because she doesn't feel good." Relief flooded me. At least he hadn't poisoned them against me. "When can I see them?" Frank zipped the bag and straightened. "When I say so." As he moved toward the door, I grabbed his arm. "They're my children too, Frank. You can't just take them." He shook me off easily. "Watch me. And if you try to follow us to my mother's, I'll tell everyone what you did." "What I did?" "I didn't do anything." His smile was cold. "Your word against mine, Audrey. And trust me, no one will believe a woman who abandons her shift at the hospital to meet her lover." The door slammed behind him, and this time I knew he wouldn't be back soon. I sank to the floor, the house echoing with terrible silence. I don't remember how long I sat there, blood drying on my chin, before I finally stumbled to my feet. The house felt like a prison. Every corner held a memory of Frank's rage or my submission. On the refrigerator, Mia's drawing of our family smiled mockingly at me, stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. My phone was shattered, my car keys missing. Frank had taken everything. I grabbed my wallet from my purse and walked out, not bothering to lock the door behind me. What was left to protect? The April evening was cool, the sky fading from blue to dusky purple as I wandered aimlessly through our neighborhood. Families were sitting down to dinner in warm, lit homes. Children played in fenced yards. Normal lives unfolding while mine had just imploded. I found myself at the bus stop, digging in my wallet for change. I had no destination in mind, just away. The bus driver gave me a concerned look as I boarded, my face clearly showing signs of violence despite my attempts to hide it with my hair. "You okay, miss?" he asked. I nodded mutely and took a seat at the back, avoiding the curious stares of other passengers. 20 minutes later, I stepped off at Sloan's Lake Park, drawn to the water like someone in a trance. The park was mostly empty as twilight deepened. I found a bench facing the lake and sat down, my body aching from Frank's assault, my mind numb with shock. Worthless. The word echoed in my head. 8 years of marriage, 2 beautiful children, a career helping others, and in the end, I was worthless. Too worthless to protect my children. Too worthless to stand up for myself. Too worthless to be loved. I stared at the darkening water, wondering how cold it would feel. Wondering if anyone would notice if I just walked in and kept walking. Wondering if my children would be better off with the memory of a mother who disappeared rather than one who failed them so completely. Frank's voice filled my head. Worthless. Pathetic. Nothing. My parents' disappointed expressions when I married him instead of going to medical school. Asterisk wasting your potential. The pity in Ms. Garrison's eyes today. What happened to the promising nurse I hired? I didn't realize I was sobbing until I tasted salt mixing with the copper tang of blood on my lip. My shoulders shook with the force of emotions I'd suppressed for years. Grief. Rage. Shame. They poured out of me in waves that left me gasping. In that moment, on that bench, I was truly alone. No children to be strong for. No job to hide behind. No husband to please. Just Audrey, broken, battered, and believing with absolute certainty that I deserved every bit of pain I'd received. The lake rippled with a sudden breeze, the water's surface breaking into 1,000 fractured pieces. Like me. Like my life. Everything I'd built, everything I'd loved, shattered beyond repair. Here. The voice startled me. A tissue appeared in my field of vision, held by a wrinkled hand adorned with a single silver ring. I looked up to find an elderly woman standing beside my bench. She wore a deep blue coat, despite the mild evening, her white hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. "Thank you," I managed, taking the tissue and wiping my face, wincing as I touched my swollen lip. She sat down beside me without asking permission, setting her worn leather handbag between us. For several minutes, she said nothing, just gazed out at the water where the last light of day danced across its surface. "My husband used to hit me too," she finally said, her voice matter-of-fact. I stiffened, instinctively pulling my sleeves down to cover the bruises on my wrists. "I don't know what you're talking about." She turned to face me then, her gaze moving deliberately from my split lip to my throat where Frank's fingerprints were surely visible. 43 years ago, I sat on a bench not unlike this one, she continued as if I hadn't spoken. 2 black eyes, broken rib, and my daughter gone. Something in her tone made me listen. There was no pity there, no judgment, just a quiet understanding that penetrated the fog of my despair. "What happened to your daughter?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Pain flickered across her face. "Margaret was 5. My husband took her after our last fight. Said I'd never see her again." She paused, her hand tightening on her handbag. "He was right." "I'm sorry," I whispered. She studied my face with strange intensity. "You know, you look exactly like I imagined she would. Same eyes. Same strength hiding behind fear." I shook my head. "There's no strength here." "Isn't there?" She gestured to the park around us. "You walked away. That takes courage." "He kicked me out and took my children," I said bitterly. "What kind of mother lets that happen?" "A mother who's been told she's worthless for so long she started to believe it." Her words sliced through me. I believed it too once, until someone sat with me on a bench and said what I'm about to say to you. She turned fully toward me then, taking my cold hands in her warm ones. Her eyes locked with mine, fierce and determined. You are not worthless, child. 5 simple words. They hung in the air between us, shimmering with truth. Something broke open inside me, not the shattering I'd felt earlier, but a cracking of the walls I'd built around my heart. How do you know? I asked, my voice cracking. Because worth isn't something other people give you or take away, she said firmly. It's yours. It always has been. But my children need a mother who believes in herself enough to fight for them. She squeezed my hands. What's your name? Audrey, I said softly. Audrey Parker. I'm Dorothy Mathis. She released my hands and turned back toward the lake. After my husband took Margaret, I didn't fight. I believed him when he said I was unfit, that no one would give a child to a woman like me. So I gave up. Her voice remained steady, but I could hear decades of pain beneath the words. What happened? I asked. I tried to find them for years. Hired private investigators when I could afford it. Followed every lead. But Richard was clever, changed their names, moved across state lines. Back then, there were no databases, no internet, no cell phone trails. She sighed, a sound heavy with regret. By the time I finally had a promising lead, Margaret would have been 18, old enough to decide for herself if she wanted to find me. She never did. Maybe she couldn't, I offered. Maybe he never told her about you. Dorothy nodded. I tell myself that. It's easier than believing she knew and chose not to look. She turned back to me. But that's not why I'm telling you this story. Why are you? Because you still have time, Audrey. Your children aren't gone forever. But if you accept what your husband has done, if you believe you deserve it, you're giving him permission to erase you from their lives. Her words hit me with the force of truth. I thought of Mia's worried eyes. Liam's small voice calling for me as Frank dragged him away. The relief on my daughter's face when I promised we'd find somewhere quiet to live. I don't know what to do, I admitted. He took my keys, my phone. I have nowhere to go. That's where you're wrong. Dorothy reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card. I run a women's shelter on the east side, she said, pressing the card into my palm. Rosewood Haven. We have room for you tonight. I stared at the card. Dorothy Mathis, executive director, was printed above an address and phone number. A shelter. The word conjured images of crowded dormitories, institutional settings. A home, she corrected. For women finding their way back to themselves. I can't, I said automatically. My children will need a mother who knows her own worth, Dorothy finished. A woman who can show them what strength really looks like. She stood, adjusting her coat. The choice is yours, Audrey. You can go back to that house and wait for him to return. Or you can come with me and begin again. I looked up sharply. How do you know my name? A small smile touched her lips. Your hospital badge is still clipped to your shirt. I glanced down, surprised to find she was right. In my haste to leave, I hadn't noticed I was still wearing my damaged uniform, ID badge hanging crooked but visible. Dorothy extended her hand. What will it be? I stared at her outstretched hand, then at the dark water of the lake. 2 paths lay before me. One led back to the house where Frank's rage lingered in every room. The other led into the unknown, guided only by the hand of a stranger who had seen through my carefully constructed lies. Why would you help me? I asked. You don't even know me. I know enough. Her hand remained steady, waiting. I know you're at a crossroads. And I know what happens when a woman believes she's worthless for too long. In that moment, with the gentle lapping of lake water as witness, I made the first truly independent decision of my adult life. I took her hand and stood. I need to get my children back, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. Dorothy nodded, a look of approval crossing her face. One step at a time, Audrey. First, we heal you. Then we fight for them. As we walked away from the bench, away from the dark thoughts that had nearly consumed me, I felt something unfamiliar stirring in my chest. Not happiness, it was too soon for that. Not peace, there were too many battles ahead. But something equally powerful, hope. For the first time in years, I dared to hope that Frank hadn't destroyed everything. That somewhere beneath the bruises and fear and self-loathing, the real Audrey still existed. The woman who had once been strong enough to build a career, to create life, to love fiercely. You are not worthless, child. 5 words from a stranger had planted a seed. Whether it would grow remained to be seen. But as I followed Dorothy to her car, I realized I wanted to find out. If you've ever felt broken by someone else's words or actions, if you've ever questioned your worth because of how others have treated you, hit that like button right now. And if you know someone who needs to hear they're not worthless, share this video with them. Sometimes the right words at the right moment can save a life. Stay with me to see how Audrey fought back against the man who tried to destroy her. Rosewood Haven wasn't what I expected. Instead of the institutional setting I'd imagined, it was a large Victorian house with a wraparound porch tucked away on a quiet street lined with maple trees. Inside, the decor was simple but warm, comfortable furniture, soft lighting, walls painted in soothing colors. We have room for 12 women and their children, Dorothy explained as she showed me to a small but clean bedroom on the 2nd floor. Some stay a few days, others for months. How long you remain is up to you. I sat on the edge of the twin bed, running my hand over the quilt. It had been patched and repaired many times, yet somehow that made it more beautiful. My husband took my children to his mother's, I said, throat tightening. I don't even know where to begin getting them back. Dorothy sat beside me, the bed creaking under our combined weight. We have a lawyer who volunteers her services, she said. You'll meet with her tomorrow. For tonight, shower, rest, and remember what I told you. She left me with clean towels, a new toothbrush, and a set of borrowed pajamas. In the adjoining bathroom, I finally confronted my reflection. My lip was split, my left eye swollen nearly shut, bruises darkening across my cheekbone and jaw. Frank's fingerprints circled my throat like a grotesque necklace. I barely recognized myself. Not just because of the injuries, but because of the emptiness in my eyes. When had I disappeared so completely? That night, in a strange bed in a house full of women I didn't know, I slept more peacefully than I had in years. No listening for Frank's heavy footsteps, no bracing for criticism or worse. Just quiet broken occasionally by a child's cry from another room or the creaking of the old house settling. Morning brought clarity. I stood before the same mirror, assessing my injuries in daylight. The swelling had worsened, but as I stared at my battered face, something shifted in my perception. For the first time, I saw not just a victim, but a survivor. Dorothy's words echoed in my mind. Asterisk, you are not worthless, child. Downstairs, I found a bustling kitchen. Women of various ages moved around each other with practiced ease, some preparing breakfast, others packing lunches for children. Dorothy sat at a large wooden table, reviewing papers. Audrey, she said, looking up. Come, eat something. You'll need your strength today. A young woman with dark curly hair set a mug of coffee before me. I'm Vanessa, she said with a gentle smile. First day's the hardest. I nodded, wrapping my hands around the warm mug. I don't know what I'm doing here. None of us did, said another woman from the stove, where she was flipping pancakes. She was older, with sleek gray-streaked hair and elegant posture. I'm Beverly. I've been here 3 months. With her 2 beautiful girls, Dorothy added, who are going to be late for school if they don't come down soon. As if summoned, 2 girls around Mia's age thundered down the stairs, backpacks bouncing. Seeing them sent a physical pain through my chest. I missed my children with an intensity that left me breathless. After breakfast, Dorothy introduced me to Lisa Braddock, the shelter's attorney. She was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Tell me everything, she said, notebook open, pen poised. And don't leave anything out. I need to know what we're dealing with. For the next 2 hours, I recounted my marriage to Frank, the good early years, the gradual descent into abuse, the final confrontation. Lisa took meticulous notes, interrupting occasionally with pointed questions. Did he ever hit the children? No, I said immediately. He yelled at them, scared them, but never hit them. Has he ever threatened to harm them or you? I hesitated. Not directly. But the night before he took them, he said if I ever tried to leave him, I'd regret being born. Lisa nodded, making another note. And his mother, she's fully supporting him? Margaret Nelson, I confirmed. She's always blamed me for Frank losing his construction business. Says I emasculated him by working while he stayed home. Financial abuse? Complete control. I have a separate account I started secretly, but there's barely enough for a month's rent. When I finished, Lisa closed her notebook and looked at me directly. Here's what we're going to do. First, we document your injuries. The hospital where you work can do this. Medical evidence is crucial. Then we file for an emergency protective order and temporary custody. Will that work? I asked, doubt creeping in. Frank will fight this. He'll say I'm lying. Let him, Lisa said firmly. Abusers follow predictable patterns. The more he rages, the more he proves our case. That afternoon, with Dorothy at my side, I called Ms. Garrison at the hospital. My hands trembled as I dialed the number on the shelter's phone. Riverside Medical Center, Nursing Administration. Ms. Garrison? It's Audrey Parker. A pause. Audrey? We've been worried sick. Are you all right? I took a deep breath. No, I'm not. But I will be. I need to tell you something, and I need your help. With Dorothy's reassuring presence, I told my supervisor everything: Frank's years of abuse, the final violent confrontation, how he'd taken the children. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, her response surprised me. I've suspected for some time, she said quietly. The bruises you tried to hide, the jumpiness, the exhaustion. I should have done more. You couldn't have known, I said. I became very good at hiding it. What do you need from me, Audrey? I need the hospital to document my injuries for a custody case. And I need time off while I sort this out. Come in today. I'll arrange for Dr. Patel in the ER to see you personally. As for time off, consider it approved. We'll call it medical leave with pay. Relief washed over me. Thank you. I thought you might fire me for abandoning my shift yesterday. Fire one of our best nurses because she's dealing with domestic violence? Ms. Garrison's voice was firm. That's not how we operate at Riverside. We take care of our own. That evening, my injuries documented in clinical detail by Dr. Patel, photographs taken for evidence, I sat with the other women of Rosewood Haven in the large living room. Beverly braided another resident's hair while Vanessa helped a young mother soothe a fussy baby. The first week is the hardest, said a woman named Tanya, her southern accent warm and comforting. You keep expecting him to find you, to drag you back. Or you wake up thinking it was all a mistake, Beverly added. That maybe he wasn't so bad, that you overreacted. I nodded, recognizing the thoughts that had flitted through my mind. I keep thinking about my children. What Frank is telling them. Whether they think I abandoned them. My Terry thought that at first, Tanya said, showing me a photo of a smiling boy on her phone. His daddy told him I didn't want him anymore. But kids are smarter than we give them credit for. They know the truth, deep down. How did you get him back? I asked. One day at a time, she said. Court orders, supervised visits, patience. Took almost a year to get full custody, but we got there. A year. The thought of being separated from Mia and Liam for that long made my chest ache. But looking around at these women, survivors rebuilding their lives piece by piece, I found a strange new courage. The next morning, Lisa called with news. We have a court date for the emergency custody hearing. Next Tuesday. So soon. Judge Winters takes domestic violence cases seriously. And the medical documentation is compelling. What about Frank? Does he know? He'll be served papers today. Be prepared, Audrey. He won't take this lying down. She was right. That afternoon, my phone at Rosewood, the emergency line few people had the number to, rang shrilly. Is this where my whore wife is hiding? Frank's voice, slurred with what I recognized as his third beer cadence. I froze, unable to speak. I know you're there, Audrey, he continued, playing victim again. You think anyone's going to believe your lies? My mother already told the school you had a nervous breakdown. Everyone knows you've been making mistakes at work. Dorothy, seeing my distress, gently took the phone from my hand. This is Dorothy Mathis, Executive Director of Rosewood Haven, she said calmly. Any further calls of this nature will be reported to the police as harassment. Good day. She hung up, then immediately dialed another number. Lisa? Dorothy. Frank found our number somehow. Yes, threatening. I think we need to move up that restraining order. The next days passed in a blur of legal preparations. Lisa coached me on what to expect in court. Dorothy helped me practice telling my story without breaking down. The other women shared their experiences with the legal system, both successes and setbacks. At night, I lay awake imagining my children. Was Mia doing her homework? Was Liam still having nightmares? Did they think I'd abandoned them? The pain was physical, a constant ache beneath my breastbone. One morning, a week after I arrived at Rosewood, Dorothy found me in the garden, staring at nothing. We heard from the school, she said, sitting beside me on the stone bench. Frank tried to formally withdraw the children yesterday. My heart stopped. He's running. No, he's not, Dorothy said firmly. The school refused without documentation from both parents. And Lisa already filed an alert with family services. He can't leave the state with them now. Relief made me lightheaded. So they're still in school? Still here in Denver? She nodded. And the principal, Mrs. Oakes, is aware of the situation. The children are being monitored. I covered my face with my hands, overwhelmed. Thank you. For everything. Dorothy placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. This is just the beginning, Audrey. The fight won't be easy. Frank will use every weapon he has, including turning your children against you. I know, I whispered. But you're not alone anymore, she continued. And you're stronger than you know. The day before the emergency custody hearing, I stood in front of the mirror in my room at Rosewood. The physical evidence of Frank's abuse had faded, my lip healed, the bruises yellowing at the edges. But something else had changed too. My eyes no longer held that empty, defeated look. Instead, I saw determination, even a flicker of the confidence I'd once had. Beverly appeared in the doorway, holding a garment bag. For tomorrow, she said, laying it on my bed. From all of us. Inside was a simple but elegant navy dress, professional, dignified, perfect for court. I can't accept this, I said, touching the fabric reverently. You can and you will, Beverly insisted. When I had my first hearing, someone did the same for me. It's tradition here. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the floor of my small room, rehearsing what I would say, imagining Frank's counterarguments, picturing my children's faces. Around midnight, a soft knock came at my door. Dorothy stood there in a flannel robe, holding 2 mugs of tea. Thought you might need company, she said. We sat on my bed, sipping the soothing chamomile brew. What if I lose? I finally voiced my deepest fear. What if the judge believes Frank? Dorothy considered this. Then we appeal. We fight harder. We never stop. How do you do this, Dorothy? Day after day, year after year, watching women like me fight battles some of us won't win. She set her mug down carefully. Because of Margaret, she said simply. Because 43 years ago, I gave up. And every woman who walks out of here with her children, with her dignity, with her future intact, she's my redemption. I reached for her hand, this remarkable woman who had found me at my lowest point and shown me a path forward. What were the 5 words someone said to you? On that bench all those years ago. Dorothy's eyes grew distant with memory. I was sitting by the river, much like you were. A woman sat down, older, elegant, with kind eyes. She looked at my battered face and said, "Your worth is not negotiable." What happened to her? She founded Rosewood Haven, Dorothy said with a small smile. And when she retired 20 years ago, she asked me to take over. So you've been doing this for 2 decades? Dorothy nodded. And I'll keep doing it until every woman knows her worth is not determined by how others treat her. I thought about this circle of women helping women, stretching back through time. How many lives had been changed by a stranger sitting down on a bench at the right moment? Get some sleep, Audrey, Dorothy said, standing. Tomorrow you take the first step toward reclaiming your children. And if Frank fights dirty? I asked. A fierce light entered Dorothy's eyes. Then he'll learn what happens when a woman stops believing she's worthless. For the first time since that terrible day when Frank took my children, I fell asleep with hope in my heart and determination in my soul. Tomorrow wouldn't end the fight, it would only begin it. But I was no longer fighting alone. The Denver family court building loomed before me, all glass and steel and intimidating formality. I stood at the bottom of the steps, clutching my folder of evidence, wearing the navy dress the women of Rosewood had given me. Ready? Lisa asked, her briefcase in one hand, her other arm supportive at my elbow. I wasn't ready. I was terrified. But I nodded anyway. Dorothy stood on my other side, solid as a mountain. Remember, she said quietly, he wants you to look weak. Don't give him that satisfaction. We ascended the steps together, a small army of 3. Inside, the polished marble floors reflected the fluorescent lights, making everything seem too bright, too exposed. Lisa guided us to courtroom C, where other people waited outside, some arguing with attorneys, others sitting in dejected silence. And then I saw them, Frank and his mother, Margaret, huddled with a man in an expensive suit. Frank looked up as we approached, his expression darkening with rage when our eyes met. Quite the performance, he sneered, gesturing at my still healing face. Did you practice those bruises in the mirror? Lisa stepped between us. Mr. Nelson, I suggest you save your comments for the judge. You think you're so clever, he continued as if she hadn't spoken. Hiding at that shelter, filing false charges. I wanted to shrink, to disappear under his glare. But Dorothy's steady presence reminded me why I was here. For Mia. For Liam. For myself. The only false things here are your accusations, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. And the judge will see that. His face contorted with fury, but before he could respond, the bailiff called our case. Nelson versus Nelson, emergency custody hearing. Inside the courtroom, Judge Winters, a stern-looking woman with silver haircut in a practical bob, studied the documents before her. I sat beside Lisa at one table, while Frank and his attorney took the other. Dorothy found a seat directly behind me. I've reviewed the initial filings, Judge Winters said, looking up. This is a request for emergency temporary custody due to allegations of domestic violence. Ms. Braddock, you may begin. Lisa stood, composed and professional. Your Honor, my client, Audrey Nelson, is a respected nurse and mother who has endured years of escalating abuse at the hands of her husband. 2 weeks ago, that abuse culminated in a violent assault after which Mr. Nelson forcibly took their 2 minor children, Mia age 7 and Liam age 5, to his mother's home. He has since denied Ms. Nelson all contact with her children. She presented the medical documentation, the photographs of my injuries, the police report filed after Frank violated the initial restraining order by calling Rosewood Haven. Ms. Nelson fears for her safety and that of her children, Lisa concluded. We ask the court to grant immediate temporary custody to my client, with supervised visitation for Mr. Nelson pending completion of anger management and parenting classes. Frank's attorney, Mr. Daniels, countered with a narrative that made my blood run cold. Your Honor, Mr. Nelson is the victim here. His wife has been increasingly unstable, making medication errors at work, displaying erratic behavior at home. On the day in question, she left work without authorization. Her supervisor called looking for her. When confronted, she became hysterical, striking herself in frustration. I gasped audibly. Frank was claiming I had injured myself? Mr. Nelson removed the children from an unsafe environment. Daniels continued smoothly. His mother, a respected member of the community, has been providing stability while Ms. Nelson receives the help she clearly needs. Judge Winters looked skeptical. You're suggesting Ms. Nelson inflicted these injuries on herself? She held up one of the photographs showing the clear handprint bruises around my neck. People in psychological distress are capable of remarkable things, Daniels replied. We have a witness who will testify to Ms. Nelson's history of self-harm during emotional episodes. With horror, I realized he meant Frank's mother. I leaned toward Lisa. He's lying. I've never harmed myself. Ever. She nodded, making notes. When Margaret Nelson took the stand, I barely recognized the elegant, silver-haired woman as the same person who had once welcomed me into her family. Her face was a mask of concern as she described a daughter-in-law spiraling into instability. She would fly into rages over nothing, Margaret testified. Once, I saw her slam her own hand in a drawer when Frank asked about money she'd spent. That never happened, I whispered to Lisa, who squeezed my hand reassuringly. And did you ever witness Ms. Nelson harm the children? Daniels asked. Margaret hesitated, and in that moment, I knew what was coming. I didn't want to say anything, she said, her voice trembling with false emotion. But yes, I've seen her shake Liam when he wouldn't stop crying. And once, she slapped Mia for spilling juice. The courtroom seemed to spin around me. This woman who had hosted our wedding, who had held my babies hours after their births, was now claiming I abused them. I felt physically ill. When it was my turn to testify, I was shaking so badly I wasn't sure I could stand. Dorothy caught my eye from the gallery and mouthed, "You are not worthless." I took the stand, swore to tell the truth, and faced the courtroom. Frank stared at me with cold hatred. His mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Ms. Nelson, Lisa began, please tell the court about your marriage to the defendant. Slowly, steadily, I told my story. The good early years. The gradual escalation of control after Frank lost his job. The first slap after my promotion. The years of increasing violence. The final confrontation when he took the children. Did you ever harm yourself during arguments, as has been suggested? Lisa asked. Never, I said firmly. The bruises, the split lip, the black eye, those were all inflicted by Frank during his assault 2 weeks ago. And have you ever harmed your children? No, I said, my voice breaking. I would never hurt them. They're everything to me. Frank's attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned my mental stability, my fitness as a mother, my promiscuity at work. He suggested I was having an affair with a doctor at the hospital, that I neglected my children for my career, that I emasculated Frank by becoming the family breadwinner. Through it all, I kept my focus on Judge Winters, answering truthfully, refusing to be baited into an emotional outburst that would support their narrative of me as unstable. Final question, Ms. Nelson, Daniels said with calculated casualness. If you were so afraid of your husband, why didn't you leave sooner? Why stay for years in what you claim was an abusive situation? I took a deep breath. Because he convinced me I was worthless, I said simply. Because he isolated me from friends and family who might have helped. Because he controlled our finances so I couldn't leave. Because he threatened to take my children if I tried. I looked directly at Frank. And he did exactly that. After I stepped down, the court heard from Ms. Garrison, who confirmed I was a valued employee with an exemplary record until recent months, when she had noticed concerning changes in my behavior and appearance. In my 20 years of nursing, she testified, I've seen the signs of domestic violence many times. Audrey displayed classic symptoms, jumpiness, unexplained injuries, declining performance, isolation from colleagues. The school counselor testified next, describing changes in both children's behavior over the past year. Mia has become withdrawn, her grades dropping. Liam has developed separation anxiety and occasional stuttering when upset. By late afternoon, I was emotionally drained. Judge Winters called a brief recess before the final testimonies. In the hallway, I slumped onto a bench, exhausted. "You're doing wonderfully," Dorothy assured me. "The judge sees through their lies." "But what if she doesn't?" I whispered. "What if she believes Margaret?" Lisa joined us, looking confident. "She won't. I've requested one more witness." "Who?" I asked. "Your daughter." My heart stopped. "Mia?" "No, I don't want her involved in this." "She already is involved," Lisa said gently. "And the judge needs to hear from someone who is actually in that house. Someone without an agenda." Before I could argue further, we were called back into the courtroom. To my shock, Mia was already there, sitting with a court-appointed child advocate, a kind-looking woman in a cardigan. My daughter's eyes lit up when she saw me, and she half rose before the advocate gently kept her seated. Judge Winters addressed the court. "I've decided to speak with the minor child in my chambers, with only the child advocate present. This is standard procedure to prevent undue influence or trauma." Frank objected immediately. "Your Honor, my daughter is only 7. She's easily confused, easily led." "Mr. Nelson," the judge cut him off sharply, "I've been evaluating children's testimony for 15 years. I think I can distinguish between coaching and truth." She turned to Mia. "Come with me, dear." As Mia followed the judge, she passed close to me. I reached out instinctively, and she grabbed my hand for just a moment. "I missed you, Mommy," she whispered. Those 4 words gave me more strength than anything else that day. 30 minutes later, Judge Winters returned to the courtroom. Mia was escorted back to the child advocate, who took her outside. The judge's expression was grave as she took her seat. "Having heard all testimony and reviewed all evidence, I'm prepared to rule on this matter," she said. "This court takes allegations of domestic violence extremely seriously. Equally, we take allegations of parental alienation and false accusations seriously." She looked directly at Frank, then at me. "Based on the medical evidence, witness testimony, and, most significantly, what I've heard from Mia Nelson, I find the allegations of domestic violence credible and substantiated." Relief flooded through me, making me lightheaded. Lisa squeezed my arm in support. Mia described in detail witnessing multiple instances of Mr. Nelson verbally and physically abusing her mother. She described being afraid when her father made Mommy bleed. She described her little brother hiding in closets when arguments began. Frank's face had gone white with fury. His mother looked stunned. "Therefore, I am granting emergency temporary custody of Mia and Liam Nelson to their mother, Audrey Nelson, effective immediately." I covered my mouth to stifle a sob of relief. "Mr. Nelson will be permitted supervised visitation twice monthly, contingent upon enrollment and participation in both anger management and parenting classes. Additionally, the temporary restraining order is extended for 6 months." Judge Winters looked at Frank sternly. "Mr. Nelson, this court takes a very dim view of using children as pawns in domestic disputes. The testimony today suggests you deliberately separated these children from their mother and attempted to alienate them from her with false allegations. Should this behavior continue, you risk losing visitation rights entirely." She turned to me. "Ms. Nelson, the children will be released to your custody today. A follow-up hearing will be scheduled in 90 days to evaluate the situation and consider more permanent arrangements." With a sharp rap of her gavel, it was over. Frank stormed out, his mother hurrying after him. His attorney remained behind, approaching Lisa with a subdued expression. "My client will appeal, of course," he said, but his heart didn't seem in it. Lisa smiled thinly. "He's welcome to try." I barely heard their exchange. My focus was entirely on the door through which Mia had disappeared. "When can I see them?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They're bringing them now," Lisa said, gathering her papers. The court officer went to collect Liam from the waiting area. Dorothy put her arm around my shoulders. "You did it, Audrey. You stood up to him. You fought back." "We're not done fighting," I said, thinking of the months ahead, the permanent custody battle that would surely come. No, she agreed. But today you won. Today, he learned you're not worthless after all. The doors opened, and there they were, my children, led by the court advocate. Mia broke into a run when she saw me, launching herself into my arms with such force, I nearly fell backward. "Mommy, we get to come home with you," she cried, her thin arms tight around my neck. Liam approached more cautiously, his small face serious. "Are you better now?" he asked. "Grandma said you were sick in your brain." I knelt down to his level, fighting back tears. "I'm not sick, sweetheart. I just missed you so much it hurt." He studied my face, then reached out to touch my healing lip. "Daddy hurt you," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I answered honestly. "But I'm okay now. And we're going to be together." "He can't hurt you anymore?" Liam asked, his voice small. "No, baby." The judge made sure of that. He nodded solemnly, then stepped into my embrace, his little body melting against mine. I held my children, breathing in their sense, feeling their hearts beat against mine, and silently thanked whatever twist of fate had led Dorothy to my bench that night. Outside the courthouse, Frank waited by his truck, his mother beside him. When he saw us emerge with the children, he started forward, but a court officer stepped between us. "Don't forget our arrangement, Mr. Nelson," the officer warned. Frank's gaze burned with hatred. "This isn't over, Audrey," he called. "You think you've won? I'll make you regret this." Mia pressed against my side fearfully. I placed a protective hand on her shoulder and met Frank's gaze without flinching. "Goodbye, Frank," I said calmly. "We'll see you at the supervised visitation if you choose to show up." I guided my children toward Dorothy's waiting car, feeling Frank's rage boring into my back. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of him. His power over me was broken. That evening at Rosewood Haven, the other residents welcomed Mia and Liam with homemade cookies and hand-drawn welcome signs. Beverly's daughters immediately took Mia under their wing, showing her the small playroom upstairs. Liam, exhausted by the day's emotions, fell asleep on my lap as I sat in the common room, surrounded by my new community. "He's beautiful," Tanya said, watching my son sleep. "They both are." "I can't believe they're really here," I whispered, stroking Liam's soft hair. Part of me was terrified the judge would believe Frank's lies. "Truth has a way of making itself known," Dorothy said, bringing me a cup of tea, "especially when children are involved." That night, with both my children asleep in the twin bed next to mine, I allowed myself to fully feel the day's victory. Frank had tried to destroy me, had nearly succeeded. He had used every weapon in his arsenal: violence, intimidation, lies, even our children. But he had failed. Because a stranger had sat beside me on a bench and told me 5 words that changed everything: "You are not worthless, child." I sent a silent prayer of gratitude to whatever angels had placed Dorothy in my path that night. Then I closed my eyes and slept the sleep of the vindicated, deep, peaceful, and healing. If this story of overcoming an abuser has touched you, hit that like button right now. And if you've ever fought back against someone who tried to convince you that you were worthless, share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Keep watching to see how Audrey rebuilt her life and found the ultimate revenge against the man who tried to destroy her. The day Mia, Liam, and I moved into our new apartment was both terrifying and exhilarating. After 3 months at Rosewood Haven, we were taking another step toward independence, a small 2-bedroom unit in a secure building across town from our old house with Frank. What do you think? I asked the children as we stood in the empty living room. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting bright squares on the beige carpet. Mia twirled in the center of the room, her arms outstretched. "It's so quiet," she exclaimed. At Rosewood, there had always been activity: women talking, children playing, phones ringing. Liam approached the window cautiously. "Can Daddy find us here?" he asked, his voice small. I knelt beside him, turning him gently to face me. "This building has security doors, buddy. And Daddy doesn't know where we live now. Is this our forever home? Mia asked, stopping her twirling. For now, I said honestly. Someday, when I save enough money, maybe we'll have a house with a yard again. But for now, this is our safe place. We didn't have much. Some donated furniture from Rosewood, clothes, a few toys the children had been allowed to take from our old house. Frank had refused to release anything else, claiming I'd stolen enough from him already. But Dorothy and the women of Rosewood had organized a nesting party. Throughout the day, they arrived with housewarming gifts, dish towels, bedding, a coffee maker, pots and pans. Beverly brought a television her family had upgraded from. Vanessa arrived with bags of groceries. Tanya and her son Terry brought a hand-me-down video game system for the kids. By evening, our apartment had transformed from an empty shell to something resembling a home. The children's room held bunk beds. Mia claimed the top, a small desk, and colorful posters on the walls. My bedroom was sparse, but functional, just a mattress on a frame and a second-hand dresser. After everyone left, the three of us sat on our new sofa, actually a lovingly refurbished piece from Rosewood Storage, eating pizza and watching a movie on the donated TV. Do you like it here? I asked during a quiet moment. Liam nodded, his mouth full of pizza. Mia considered the question more carefully. It's not like our old house, she said finally. But I don't miss the yelling. Me neither, Liam agreed, his voice suddenly fierce. And I don't miss hiding in the closet. I pulled them both close, breathing in the scent of their clean hair. There won't be any more yelling or hiding, I promised. This is our fresh start. That night, after tucking them into their new beds, I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the evidence of so many people's generosity. 3 months ago, I had believed Frank when he said I had no one. Now I had an entire community standing behind me. My phone chimed with a text from Dorothy. How are you settling in? I smiled, typing back. It feels strange, but good. The kids are already asleep. That's a good sign. Remember, I'm just a call away if you need anything. I know. Thank you for everything. No thanks needed. Just keep moving forward. The next morning marked another milestone, my first day back at Riverside Medical Center. Ms. Garrison had been wonderfully supportive, approving my medical leave while I dealt with the immediate custody issues, but now it was time to return. I stood before the mirror in my bedroom, adjusting my scrubs. The physical marks of Frank's abuse had long since faded, but sometimes I still saw shadows of that broken woman in my reflection. I straightened my shoulders deliberately. That woman was gone. In her place stood a survivor. Mom? Are you nervous about going back to work? Mia asked from the doorway. I turned, surprised by her perception. A little, I admitted. It's been a while. She came to stand beside me, looking at our reflection together. At 7, she was already developing my height, my dark hair, my serious eyes. You look strong, she said simply. I blinked back sudden tears. So do you, sweetheart. Dorothy had arranged for the children to attend Rosewood's day program until school started in 2 weeks. I dropped them off on my way to the hospital, Liam clinging to me briefly before Beverly's daughters distracted him with promises of fresh cookies later. Walking through Riverside's main entrance felt like stepping into a previous life. The familiar antiseptic smell, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the controlled chaos of a busy hospital, it all seemed both intimately familiar and strangely new. At the nurse's station, my colleagues greeted me with warm hugs and discreet support. No one mentioned Frank or my absence directly, but their eyes held knowing compassion. We saved your locker, said Jen, a nurse I'd worked with for years. And your favorite stethoscope is still in the supply cabinet. Ms. Garrison found me organizing patient charts. Audrey, she said warmly. Welcome back. How does it feel? Like coming home, I said, surprised to find it true. Thank you for holding my position. Never a question, she replied. Though I should warn you, Dr. Patel has been asking when you'd return. He says the ER hasn't been the same without you. I flushed slightly. Dr. Patel, The emergency physician who had documented my injuries had been professionally kind but distinctly warm during that difficult examination. At the time, I'd been too traumatized to notice much beyond his gentle confidence. Sure enough, halfway through my shift, he appeared at the nurse's station, his dark eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Nurse Parker," he said, using my professional name. "You're back." "Dr. Patel," I acknowledged. "Thanks again for your help with everything." He nodded, understanding my discretion. "How are you settling in?" "Finding my rhythm again," I said. "It helps to be busy." "And your children?" he asked, his voice softening. "Adjusting. It will take time." He hesitated, then said, "If you ever need anything professional or otherwise, my door is open." I thanked him, touched by the offer but not ready to consider what otherwise might mean. Frank's voice still echoed in my head sometimes. Worthless. Damaged. Who would want you now? That evening, collecting the children from Rosewood, Dorothy invited me to stay for dinner. And afterward, she added, "There's something I'd like you to consider." Over a meal of homemade lasagna, I watched Mia and Liam interact with the other children. They seemed more relaxed here than at our new apartment, more themselves. Liam laughed openly at Terry's jokes. Mia helped Beverly's younger daughter with her drawing. Their healing, Dorothy observed, following my gaze. Faster than you might expect. Children are resilient, I agreed. More than adults sometimes. After dinner, while the children played upstairs, Dorothy led me to her office. "I mentioned I had something for you to consider," she said, sitting behind her desk. "We have a support group that meets here twice monthly. Women who've left abusive situations, who are rebuilding their lives." "Like a therapy group?" I asked. "More informal. A space to share experiences, challenges, victories. Many of the women are further along in their journeys. They have insights that might help you. And you," she added meaningfully, "have insights that might help others." I hesitated. The thought of sharing my story with strangers made me uncomfortable. "I don't know, Dorothy. Just try one meeting," she suggested. "Next Thursday at 7. The children can join the kids group upstairs while the adults meet." I agreed reluctantly, more to please Dorothy than from any belief it would help. But the following Thursday found me sitting in a circle of chairs in Rosewood's community room, nervously twisting the strap of my purse as women filtered in. Beverly I knew, of course. Tanya greeted me with a warm hug. The others were new faces, 8 women ranging from their 20s to their 60s, some with the haunted look of recent trauma, others with the quiet confidence of survivors who had rebuilt their lives. A woman named Pamela facilitated the group. In her early 40s, she had auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and calm, steady eyes. "Let's welcome Audrey," she said after the introductions. She and her children recently moved into their own place after 3 months here at Rosewood. Murmurs of congratulation circled the room. One woman, barely older than 20, looked at me with awe. "You got your own place already? With kids?" I nodded, suddenly realizing my small victory might seem monumental to someone still trapped in the cycle of abuse. "Tell us a bit about your journey, Audrey," Pamela suggested. "Whatever you're comfortable sharing." To my surprise, once I began speaking, the words flowed easily. These women understood in a way no one else could the gradual erosion of self, the isolation, the fear, the self-doubt. They nodded at parts of my story that outsiders might question, why I stayed so long, why I made excuses, why I believed Frank's lies. The hardest part, I concluded, is rebuilding my relationship with my children. They saw things no child should see. They're scared of noises, scared of men, scared their father will find us. A woman named Rochelle nodded emphatically. "My daughter still sleeps with the lights on 2 years later. The trauma doesn't just disappear when you leave." "What's helping?" Pamela asked. I thought about it. Routine. Consistency. Proving every day that I'm not going anywhere. "The trust rebuilds slowly," Beverly said. "But it does rebuild." As the meeting continued, women shared their challenges and triumphs. Rochelle had received a promotion at work. Tanya's son had finally stopped wetting the bed. An older woman named Helen had just finalized her divorce after 40 years of marriage. By the end of the 2 hours, I felt a connection to these women I hadn't anticipated. They weren't just fellow survivors, they were guides on a path I was just beginning to walk. Same time in 2 weeks? Pamela asked as we gathered our things. I'll be here, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Over the next months, our little family settled into new rhythms. The children started school, Mia in 2nd grade, Liam in kindergarten. I arranged my nursing shifts to match their schedule as much as possible, working while they were in school and using Rosewood's after-school program to fill the gaps. Frank remained a shadow at the edges of our lives. He attended his court-mandated anger management sessions sporadically. He showed up for some supervised visits, missed others. When he did come, he spent the time trying to pump the children for information about our new home or poisoning them against me with subtle digs. Daddy says you took us away because you don't want him to be happy, Mia reported after one visit. That's not true, I said carefully. I took us away because I needed to keep you safe. Safe from Daddy? Liam asked, his face troubled. I chose my words carefully, aware that demonizing Frank would only confuse them more. Safe from the fighting. Safe from the fear. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their home. The support group became my lifeline. Twice a month, I sat in that circle and found strength in shared experiences. Pamela, I learned, had been a kindergarten teacher whose husband had controlled every aspect of her life for 15 years before she escaped with her teenage son. The first year is the hardest, she told me one evening as we walked to our cars after group. Everything feels fragile, like it could all fall apart if you make one wrong move. That's exactly it, I agreed. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for Frank to find some way to destroy what I'm building. He might try, she acknowledged. Mine did false reports to CPS, contested every aspect of the divorce, turned my own parents against me for a while. How did you survive it? She smiled. One day at a time. And I surrounded myself with people who reminded me of my worth when I forgot it. Her words echoed Dorothy's wisdom, and I realized I was building that same circle of support. Dorothy, the women at Rosewood, my colleagues at the hospital, my children's teachers who had been briefed on our situation and watched for signs of trauma. 6 months after moving into our apartment, I ran into Pamela at the grocery store. Her son Tyler was with her, taller than when I'd last seen him, helping his mother compare cereal prices. Audrey, she exclaimed, embracing me. You look wonderful. So do you, I replied, noticing the healthy glow that had replaced her former pallor. We caught up briefly in the aisle, exchanging news about work and children. As we prepared to part ways, she hesitated. Listen, a few of us from group are having dinner Friday night at that new place on Wadsworth. Would you like to join us? I automatically began to decline. Arranging childcare was complicated, and socializing still felt like a luxury I hadn't earned. Before you say no, Pamela added with a knowing smile, Dorothy already offered to watch the kids. She says it's time you remembered you're not just a nurse and a mother. The old Audrey would have made an excuse. The woman Frank had shaped would have retreated into isolation. But the woman I was becoming, the one who knew her own worth, found herself saying, I'd love to. That Friday night, surrounded by women who understood my journey without explanation, I laughed for what felt like the first time in years. We shared stories not just of survival, but of rebuilding, new jobs, new homes, new dreams cautiously emerging from the ashes of what we'd left behind. To new beginnings, Rochelle toasted, raising her glass of sparkling water. And to old endings, Helen added with a wicked grin, may our exes get exactly what they deserve. We clinked glasses, united in the shared knowledge that living well truly is the best revenge. As I drove home that night, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. The constant fear that had been my companion for so long had receded. In its place was something new, not quite confidence yet, but its quieter cousin, self-trust. Frank had tried to convince me I was worthless without him. But here I was, 6 months later, with a job I excelled at, children who were healing, a home that was truly ours, and friends who saw my value. Dorothy was right. My worth had never been negotiable. It had been mine all along, waiting to be reclaimed. When I arrived at Rosewood to collect my sleeping children, Dorothy met me at the door. "Did you enjoy yourself?" she asked, ushering me inside. "I did," I said, surprised by how true it was. It felt normal. She smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "That's the goal, Audrey. Not just survival, but a life worth living." I gathered my children, Liam heavy with sleep in my arms, Mia drowsy but walking beside me. As we settled them into the car, Dorothy touched my shoulder. "You're doing it," she said simply. "Everything we hoped for when you took my hand that night at the lake." Driving home through the quiet streets of Denver, my children safe in the back seat, I felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. 6 months ago, I had been broken, believing Frank's poisonous words, ready to surrender to despair. Then a stranger had sat down beside me and said 5 words that changed everything. "You are not worthless, child." And day by day, step by step, I was proving her right. And then he walked in. I noticed him immediately, tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was with an older woman who bore such a striking resemblance to him that she could only be his mother. "That's Dr. Brennan," whispered Rochelle, another woman from our group. "He volunteers at the free clinic where I take my daughter." I watched surreptitiously as he helped his mother to a table, the gentle way he guided her, the attentive manner in which he listened to her. So different from Frank's impatient dismissal of anyone's needs but his own. Our eyes met briefly across the restaurant. He smiled, a small, almost shy gesture that sent unexpected warmth through me. I quickly looked away, flustered by my reaction. "He's single," Rochelle added with a grin. "His wife died about 5 years ago. Cancer." "I'm not looking," I said automatically. The women exchanged knowing glances, but said nothing more. As we were leaving, he approached our table. Up close, his eyes were even kinder, deep brown with tiny laugh lines at the corners. "Excuse me," he said, addressing our group but looking at me. "I just wanted to say hello. I recognized some of you from the clinic." Introductions were made. His name was James Brennan, a pediatrician who volunteered at the community health center where several women from our support group took their children. "And you?" he asked, turning to me. "Have we met before?" "No," I said, finding my voice. "I'm Audrey Parker. I work at Riverside Medical." "Nurse Parker," he said with a warm smile. "Your reputation precedes you. Dr. Linwood speaks very highly of you." I blushed, surprised that the chief of pediatrics at Riverside would mention me at all, let alone positively. "Well, I should get back to my mother," James said after a moment. "It was nice meeting you, Audrey." As he walked away, Pamela nudged me. He was definitely interested. "Don't be ridiculous," I said, though something fluttered in my chest at the thought. That night, I called Dorothy to check on the children and found myself telling her about James. "He seems different," I concluded lamely. "Different from Frank, you mean?" Dorothy said. I could hear the smile in her voice. "I'm not ready for that," I insisted. "I may never be." "Maybe not," she agreed. "But don't close the door on possibility, Audrey. Your heart has more capacity for healing than you know." The following week, I was reviewing a patient's chart at the nurse's station when a familiar voice made me look up. "Nurse Parker." We meet again. James Brennan stood before me in a white coat, stethoscope around his neck. He looked more handsome in daylight, his features strong but gentle. "Dr. Brennan," I said, surprised. "What brings you to Riverside?" "Consulting on a case with Dr. Linwood," he explained. "And please call me James." Our conversation was brief, but left me feeling strangely buoyant for the rest of my shift. When he appeared again 2 days later, this time with no apparent medical reason, I knew it wasn't coincidence. I was wondering, he said, his confidence from our first meeting replaced by endearing nervousness, if you might like to have coffee sometime. When you're not working, of course. The invitation caught me off guard. No man had asked me out since before Frank. The thought of dating again made my stomach tighten with anxiety. I have children, I blurted out. James smiled. I know. Mia and Liam, right? Dr. Linwood mentioned their patients here. And I'm complicated, I added, not meeting his eyes. My life is complicated. His expression softened. Audrey, everyone's life is complicated in some way. Mine certainly is. I'm just asking for coffee, not your life story. Something in his patient tone reminded me of Dorothy. Don't close the door on possibility. Coffee would be nice, I heard myself say. Our first date was at a small cafe not far from the hospital. I arrived early, stomach churning with nerves, half hoping he wouldn't show. But he did, right on time, wearing jeans and a blue sweater that made his eyes appear even warmer. Conversation came more easily than I expected. We talked about work, about his volunteer hours at the clinic, about books we'd read recently. He spoke about his late wife, Cassandra, with such tender respect that it brought tears to my eyes. I'm sorry, I said. It must have been devastating to lose her. It was, he agreed. For a long time, I thought I'd never feel joy again. But grief changes shape over time. It doesn't disappear, but it makes room for other emotions. I nodded, understanding more than he knew. And you, he asked gently. Your children's father? I hesitated, old shame rising like bile in my throat. We're divorced, I said simply, not ready to share the full truth. James seemed to sense my reluctance. Well, his loss is potentially my gain, he said lightly, changing the subject. That coffee date led to others. Sometimes we met during lunch breaks, stealing half an hour of conversation between patients. Other times, when Dorothy watched the children, we explored Denver together, art galleries, bookstores, parks I'd never visited despite living in the city for years. James never pushed for more than I was ready to give. He seemed content with our slow pace, with the careful way I kept certain topics off limits. But as weeks passed, I found myself wanting to tear down the walls I'd built. The night I finally told him about Frank, we were sitting on a bench in City Park, not unlike the one where I'd met Dorothy a year earlier. The autumn air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath our feet as we walked. I need to tell you something, I said, my heart hammering. About my marriage. James took my hand, his touch gentle but grounding. I'm listening. The story poured out of me then, the years of abuse, the night Frank took the children, Dorothy finding me at my lowest point, the struggle to rebuild. Throughout my halting narrative, James remained silent, his hand steady around mine, his eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, I waited for his reaction, pity, horror, or worst of all, the subtle withdrawal I'd seen in others who couldn't handle the darkness of my past. Instead, he raised my hand to his lips and kissed it softly. Thank you for trusting me with your truth, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You are the bravest person I've ever known. Something broke open inside me then, not the shattering I'd experienced on that bench with Dorothy, but a gentle unfurling, like a flower finally turning toward light after too long in shadow. That night, when James walked me to my door, our goodbye kiss was different, deeper, more urgent, filled with unspoken promises. His hands cradled my face as though I were precious, his body warm against mine in the cool evening air. I should go, he whispered against my lips, though he made no move to leave. Stay, I breathed, surprising myself with my boldness. His eyes searched mine. Are you sure? In answer, I took his hand and led him inside. The children were with Frank for his monthly supervised visit, the apartment quiet and still around us. James followed me to my bedroom, his presence both exciting and terrifying. No man had touched me with tenderness since before Frank's abuse began. We can go as slowly as you need, James said, sensing my nervousness. But I didn't want slow. I wanted to reclaim what had been taken from me: pleasure, intimacy, trust in my own body's responses. I kissed him deeply, my fingers working at the buttons of his shirt. He responded with equal passion, his hands exploring me with reverent attention. When my shirt came off, revealing faint scars from Frank's violence, James paused, his expression darkening briefly before he lowered his lips to each mark, as if healing them with his touch. "Beautiful," he murmured against my skin. "So beautiful." In the soft lamplight of my bedroom, we discovered each other slowly. His body was strong but gentle, his touch seeking my pleasure before his own. When we finally came together, the connection was more than physical. It was healing, transformative, sacred in its vulnerability. Afterward, lying in his arms, I felt tears slip from my eyes. "Did I hurt you?" James asked, alarmed. I shook my head, burying my face against his chest. "No, the opposite." He held me tighter, understanding without explanation. That night marked a turning point. James became a fixture in our lives, helping Liam with science projects, teaching Mia to ride a bike without training wheels, bringing takeout on nights when I worked late. The children were wary at first, especially Liam, who had grown distrustful of men after witnessing Frank's violence. "Is Dr. James going to live with us?" Mia asked one evening as I tucked her into bed. "No, sweetheart," I said. "We're just friends right now." She studied my face with those perceptive eyes that sometimes seemed too wise for her 8 years. "You smile more when he's here," she observed. "You never smiled like that with Daddy." Out of the mouths of babes. Liam took longer to warm up to James, watching him with solemn eyes from a safe distance. But James was patient, never forcing interaction, letting Liam set the pace. The breakthrough came when James brought over a model rocket kit. "My dad built these with me when I was your age," he told Liam. "I thought maybe you'd like to try." They spent the afternoon on the apartment's small balcony, James patiently explaining each step, never raising his voice when Liam made mistakes, celebrating small victories with high fives that Liam gradually began to initiate. That night, as Liam got ready for bed, he asked, "Can Dr. James come back tomorrow? We need to paint our rocket." It was the first time he'd expressed enthusiasm about anyone since Frank left. Dorothy watched our relationship bloom with quiet satisfaction. "He sees you," she observed one afternoon as we watched James push the children on swings at the park. "Not who you were or what happened to you, but who you are now." "How can you tell?" I asked. She smiled. "Because he looks at you the way a man looks at a miracle, with wonder, not possession." Frank, of course, was less enthusiastic about this development. During one supervised visitation, Mia innocently mentioned Dr. James, helping her with homework. "Who the hell is Dr. James?" Frank demanded, his face darkening with the familiar rage I once feared. "Mommy's friend," Mia replied, shrinking back. "He's nice to us." The visitation supervisor intervened before Frank could escalate, but at the next court hearing, his attorney argued that I was exposing the children to inappropriate relationships and replacing their father with a stranger. Judge Winters, to her credit, saw through the tactic. "Mr. Nelson," she said firmly, "the court does not dictate who Ms. Parker may or may not date, provided the children's well-being isn't compromised. And from all reports, they're thriving in her care." As Frank stormed out of the courtroom, I realized something profound. His power to hurt me was diminishing. Each day I spent with James, each moment of genuine respect and tenderness, further exposed the lie at the heart of Frank's abuse, that I was worthless, unlovable, deserving of pain. The ultimate revenge wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. It was discovering that I was worthy of love, real love that built up rather than tore down, that healed rather than wounded, that empowered rather than controlled. Frank had nearly destroyed me. But in the process, he had inadvertently set me on a path to a happiness deeper than I had ever known. A happiness he could never touch or taint or take away. 6 months into my relationship with James, life had settled into a rhythm I'd once thought impossible. The children were thriving, Mia's grades had improved dramatically, and Liam's nightmares had all but disappeared. I had been promoted to head nurse in my department at Riverside. James and I had begun tentatively discussing a future together. It was a crisp Saturday in October when our hard-won peace shattered. The children and I were at the community fall festival with James. Liam's face was painted like a tiger. Mia was proudly carrying a stuffed bear James had won for her at the ring toss, and I was experiencing a rare moment of pure contentment when my phone rang. "Audrey? It's Lisa Braddock. My lawyer rarely called on weekends." Immediately, my guard went up. "What's wrong?" I asked, stepping away from the festivities. "Frank missed his court-ordered drug test yesterday," she said without preamble. "And he didn't show for his scheduled visitation this morning." "That's not unusual," I said, relief washing over me. Frank had been increasingly erratic about visitation, sometimes not showing up, other times arriving late or ending early. Each missed visit was both a disappointment for the children and a relief for me. "There's more," Lisa continued, her voice tense. "The supervisor called me. Frank showed up 2 hours late, clearly intoxicated. When they refused to let him see the kids, he became belligerent, threatening to take what's his." Ice formed in my stomach. "You think he might try something?" "I don't know," she admitted. "But I've already called the police to do extra patrols near your apartment. And I filed an emergency motion to suspend his visitation pending a hearing." I glanced at my children, laughing as James attempted to toss a football through a tire swing. "Should I take them somewhere else tonight?" "Not go home." "It might be prudent," Lisa agreed. "Just until we know where he is and what state of mind he's in." I thanked her and hung up, my hands trembling slightly. Just when I thought we were safe, just when fear had begun to loosen its grip on my life, Frank found a way to drag us back into his chaos. James noticed my expression immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, coming to my side. I explained the situation in hushed tones, not wanting the children to overhear. His face grew serious as he listened. "You'll stay at my place tonight," he said decisively. "All of you. Are you sure?" "We don't want to impose." "Audrey," he interrupted gently, "nothing about you or your children could ever be an imposition. Let's gather them up and go now, just to be safe." As we walked toward the children, a familiar voice froze me in my tracks. "So this is the doctor who's playing daddy to my kids." Frank stood a few yards away, his stance unsteady, eyes bloodshot. He wore the same clothes he'd had on at his failed visitation attempt, now rumpled and stained. The festival crowds moved around him, parents instinctively pulling their children away from his obvious intoxication. "Frank," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're not supposed to be here." "It's a public event," he slurred. "And those are my kids." He pointed at Mia and Liam, who had spotted him and were now frozen in place, their faces masks of fear. James stepped slightly in front of me, protective but not aggressive. "Mr. Nelson, this isn't the place for this conversation. You're upset, and the children are frightened." Frank's face contorted with rage. "Don't tell me how my kids feel," he shouted, drawing stares from nearby families. "Who the hell do you think you are? Daddy?" Liam's small voice cut through the tension. He had edged closer, Mia clinging to his hand. "Are you mad again?" Something in Frank's expression shifted at the sound of his son's voice, a flash of shame quickly buried under renewed anger. "Come here, buddy," he said, his tone artificially gentle. "You too, Mia. We're going for ice cream." "They're not going anywhere with you," I said firmly. "You missed your scheduled visitation, and you're clearly in no condition to be with them now." Frank took a menacing step forward. "They're my children." "Sir," a security guard approached, drawn by the escalating scene. "I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice or leave the festival." "Mind your own business," Frank snapped, never taking his eyes off me. "This is between me and my wife." "Ex-wife," I corrected. "And the court order is very clear about when and how you can see the children." Frank's face darkened further. "Always hiding behind lawyers and judges," he spat. "You think you're so much better than me now, don't you? With your doctor boyfriend and your fancy promotion. James placed a steadying hand on my back, a silent reminder of his support. Mia and Liam had moved behind us, using our bodies as shields against their father's volatile presence. Frank, I said, keeping my voice calm, you're scaring the children. Please, go home, sober up, and call Lisa about rescheduling your visitation. Don't tell me what to do, he shouted, taking another step forward. You ruined my life. You took everything from me. And now you're trying to replace me with this. He gestured contemptuously at James, using a vulgarity that made nearby parents gasp and hurry their children away. The security guard spoke into his radio, calling for backup. Sir, this is your final warning. Frank ignored him, his focus laser-tight on me. You think you've won, don't you, Audrey? You think you're better than me now. Something shifted inside me then, a final shutting of the fear that had defined our relationship for so long. I stepped forward, moving slightly away from James's protective presence. This isn't about winning, Frank, I said, my voice clear and strong. This is about surviving what you did to me. This is about building a life where our children don't hide in closets when they hear angry voices. This is about remembering that I was never worthless, no matter how many times you told me I was. His face contorted with rage. You ungrateful bitch. No, I interrupted, my voice rising. You don't get to speak to me that way anymore. You don't get to scare our children anymore. You don't get to control my life anymore. Frank lunged forward suddenly, his hand raised. But before he could reach me, 2 festival security guards grabbed him from behind, restraining his arms. Let go of me, he shouted, struggling against their grip. Sir, you're being removed from the premises, one guard said firmly. And the police have been called. Frank continued to struggle, his rage now directed at the guards. Do you know who I am? Do you know what she did to me? She took my kids. She turned them against me. As they dragged him away, he continued shouting accusations and threats, creating a spectacle that drew the attention of everyone nearby. Mia buried her face against my side, while Liam watched with wide, frightened eyes. Is Daddy going to jail? He asked in a small voice. I knelt down to his level, brushing hair from his forehead. I don't know, buddy. But right now, we need to make sure you and Mia are safe. James squatted beside us, his presence calm and steady. How about we go get some hot chocolate and talk about this somewhere quieter? The children nodded, clearly relieved to be leaving the scene of their father's meltdown. As we walked toward the exit, I saw police cars arriving, lights flashing. A small crowd had gathered around the security office where Frank had been taken. At a nearby cafe, over hot chocolate and cookies, I tried to explain the situation to the children in terms they could understand. Daddy is having a really hard time right now, I said carefully. He's making choices that aren't good for him or for us. Is that why he was so angry? Mia asked, her fingers shredding a napkin. Partly, I acknowledged. But mostly he's angry because he can't control us anymore. Like when he used to make you cry? Liam asked with painful directness. I nodded, fighting back tears. Yes, like that. But the important thing for you both to know is that none of this is your fault. And you're safe now. Are we going to stay with Dr. James tonight? Mia asked, glancing at him with tentative trust. James smiled gently. If that's okay with you. I have a guest room already, and we could make pancakes in the morning. The children's enthusiastic response to this suggestion helped lighten the mood, but as we drove to James's townhouse, my phone buzzed repeatedly with updates from Lisa and the police. Frank had been arrested for public intoxication, disorderly conduct, and violating the restraining order. He would appear before a judge on Monday. That night, after the children were asleep in James's guest room, I sat on his couch, emotionally drained. You were incredible today, he said, joining me with 2 cups of tea. The way you stood up to him, I've never seen anything like it. I accepted the tea gratefully. A year ago, I couldn't have done that. I would have been too afraid. What changed? I thought about it. I stopped believing his lies. About himself. About me. I looked at James, at his kind eyes that had never once held the cruelty I'd grown accustomed to in Frank's. And I had people who helped me remember the truth. James took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I'm proud of you," he said simply. 3 days later, I sat in another courtroom, listening as Judge Winters reviewed the police report from the festival incident. Frank sat at the defense table, looking haggard and hungover, a court-appointed attorney beside him. "Mr. Nelson," Judge Winters said, peering at him over her reading glasses, "this is your third violation of the restraining order. You appeared at a public event intoxicated, verbally abused Miss Parker, frightened your children, and had to be physically restrained by security personnel. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Frank shifted uncomfortably. "I just wanted to see my kids," he muttered. "She's keeping them from me." According to the visitation supervisor's report, you failed to appear for your scheduled visitation, then arrived 2 hours late and intoxicated, the judge countered. "Miss Parker has followed every court order to the letter. You, sir, have not." She shuffled through the papers before her. "I'm revoking your visitation privileges indefinitely. If you wish to see your children in the future, you will need to complete alcohol treatment, anger management, and parenting classes, not just attend sporadically, but complete them with verification from the providers." Frank half rose from his chair. "You can't do that. They're my kids." "Sit down, Mr. Nelson," Judge Winters ordered sharply. "I can and I am. Furthermore, I'm extending the restraining order to 3 years and adding an alcohol monitoring requirement. You will wear an ankle monitor that detects alcohol consumption, and you will submit to random drug testing." "I'll lose my job," Frank protested. "You should have considered that before creating a public disturbance and threatening your ex-wife," the judge replied unsympathetically. "Consider yourself lucky you're not facing jail time." As the hearing concluded, I felt no triumph, no vindictive satisfaction. Only relief that my children would be safer and a lingering sadness for the man Frank might have been if he had confronted his demons instead of blaming everyone else for his failures. Outside the courtroom, Lisa squeezed my arm. "This is a good outcome, Audrey." The judge clearly sees through his manipulation. "It still feels like losing," I admitted. "For the children, I mean. They deserved a better father. They have a wonderful mother," she countered. "And from what I've seen, a man in their lives who models what healthy masculinity looks like." I thought of James, his patience with Liam's fears, his respect for Mia's independence, his unwavering support of me. Yes, I agreed. They do have that. That evening, I met Dorothy at Rosewood Haven, needing her wisdom to process the day's events. We sat in her office, the space where I had first begun to rebuild my life after that night at the lake. "So Frank has finally faced real consequences," she said after I recounted the hearing. "It doesn't feel like winning," I confessed. "It feels sad." Dorothy nodded. "Of course it does. You're a compassionate person, Audrey. You never wanted revenge, you wanted safety. You wanted peace. You wanted your children to have 2 whole, healthy parents. Instead, they have one parent who's struggling to heal and another who refuses to admit he needs healing. That's not your burden to carry," Dorothy reminded me. "Frank's choices are his own." I sighed, tracing the edge of my mug. "I keep thinking about what you said that night we met. About your husband taking your daughter away. Did you ever feel, I don't know, vindicated when he finally faced consequences?" Dorothy's eyes grew distant with memory. "Richard never did face consequences, not really. He died of liver failure when Margaret would have been 15. Drank himself to death, according to the private investigator I hired." "I'm sorry," I said softly. She shook her head. "The point is, Audrey, revenge isn't what heals us. It's not what makes us whole again. It's remembering our worth and building a life that reflects that truth." I thought about my life now, my thriving children, my fulfilling work, my relationship with James, my friendships with women who understood my journey. None of it had come from Frank's downfall. It had come from the slow, patient work of rebuilding. The real revenge, Dorothy continued with a small smile, is living well. And from where I sit, you're executing that revenge brilliantly. As I drove home that evening to where James and the children waited, I reflected on how far I'd come from that desperate woman on the bench at Sloane's Lake. Frank had tried to destroy me, had nearly succeeded. But here I was stronger, wiser, and finally free of the fear that had defined my life for so long. Frank's public meltdown and subsequent legal consequences weren't my victory. My victory was in the words I had spoken to him at the festival. I was never worthless, no matter how many times you told me I was. That was the ultimate revenge, not that he had lost everything, but that I had found myself. 6 months after Frank's final meltdown at the festival, James took me back to the cafe where we had our first date. As we sat at the same table, he reached across and took my hand. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice steady despite the nervous flicker in his eyes. My heart raced. "Yes, I love you, Audrey. And I love Mia and Liam. I want to build a life with you, all of you. Not right away, not until you're completely ready, but someday." He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "This isn't a proposal, not yet," he clarified. "It's a promise that when you're ready, I'll be here. No pressure, no timeline." I stared at the ring, emotions swirling through me, joy, fear, hope, hesitation. The old voice in my head whispered that I didn't deserve this happiness, that it would inevitably be taken away. But another voice, one that sounded remarkably like Dorothy's, spoke louder. "You are not worthless, child." I looked up at James, at the love shining in his eyes, and made my choice. "I don't need someday," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "I know what I want now." His smile lit up his entire face as I extended my hand, allowing him to slip the ring onto my finger. Later that evening, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside, I could hear James reading a bedtime story to the children, their laughter floating through the open window. I thought about that night at Sloane's Lake, how close I had come to surrendering to despair, how a chance encounter with a stranger had redirected the course of my life. I thought about Dorothy's 5 words that had planted the first seed of my rebirth. "You are not worthless, child." 2 years had passed since that night. 2 years of struggle, of healing, of rebuilding. 2 years of rediscovering my strength, my voice, my worth. Frank remained a diminished presence in our lives. After completing the court-mandated treatment programs, he had been granted limited supervised visitation, which he attended with newfound sobriety, if not true remorse. The children approached these visits with cautious optimism, and I had learned to release my anxiety about them, trusting that they were safe and that James and I were providing the stable foundation they needed. Perhaps the most surprising development in my journey had been my decision to volunteer at Rosewood Haven one evening a week. Dorothy had suggested it, recognizing that I had something valuable to offer women just beginning the path I had already walked. "Your story has power," she told me. "There's a woman out there right now, sitting in the dark, believing she's worthless. She needs to hear what you have to say." My first support group as a peer counselor rather than a participant had been terrifying. But when I shared my journey from that bench at the lake to where I stood now, I saw recognition in the eyes of the women listening. I saw hope kindle where before there had been only despair. One young woman approached me afterward, her arm in a cast, her eyes downcast. "Did you ever think you couldn't make it on your own?" she asked softly. "That maybe the devil you know is better than being alone?" I took her hand gently. "Every day," I admitted, "until I realized I was never really alone. And neither are you." That was the true gift Dorothy had given me on that bench, not just the 5 words that saved my life, but the understanding that healing happens in community. That women supporting women creates a force stronger than any abuser's rage or manipulation. In the end, Frank's attempts to destroy me had backfired spectacularly. By trying to convince me I was worthless, he had inadvertently set me on a path to discovering my true value. By isolating me, he had pushed me toward a community of survivors whose strength continually inspired me. By attempting to control me through fear, he had ultimately freed me to love without fear. That was the sweetest revenge, not that he had lost everything, but that I had found myself. Not that he suffered consequences, but that I created a life so full of joy and purpose that his power over me was reduced to nothing. The night sky darkened above me, stars appearing one by one. Inside, the children's laughter had quieted. James appeared at the doorway, silhouetted against the warm light of our home. "They're asking for you," he said. "Liam says I don't do the voices right." I smiled, rising from my chair. Some things only a mother can do. As I moved toward him, toward our children, toward the future we were building together, I sent a silent thought of gratitude to Dorothy and all the women who had helped me find my way back to myself. "You are not worthless, child." 5 words that had changed everything. 5 words I now passed on to other women beginning their own journeys toward freedom and self-worth. 5 words that reminded me every day that the most powerful form of revenge against those who try to destroy us is to thrive in spite of them. I was never worthless. I never will be again. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button right now and join our community of survivors and supporters. Then share this video with someone who might be sitting on their own bench, believing the lies that have been told about their worth. Remember, sometimes 5 words from a stranger can change a life forever. Sometimes those words can come from you. Until next time, remember your worth is not negotiable. It never was.